this is a sprinkling of the kind of questions that they wanted to ask you. And Bhumi and I will be only the mouthpiece to ask those questions. Bhumi Nathan first.
Very good afternoon, sir. Sir, you started your career as a lecturer of political science. What inspired you to join civil service? And you have done various responsibilities along your illustrious career as a teacher, as a civil servant, and as a minister. Which among these career tracks has been the most satisfying for you and why?
Nothing inspired me to join the civil service. My father inspired me to join the civil
Okay.
So I was under great pressure, parental pressure. And because I was a reasonably good student, well known in the university, there was a lot of peer group pressure also. And this was the only thing, which was available in those days. Was, mind you, in my time, you either became an IAS officer or you became a clerk. I mean, there was the state civil service, but this was the kind of thing which was there. And naturally, every father wanted the child to become an IAS officer. Now, I gave IAS as my first preference and foreign service only as my second preference. That was also a result of some confusion, some accident. So I gave IAS as my first preference. I qualified for it and became an IAS officer. Then I opted for Bihar cadre. Now let me tell you one thing. It is very unfair to ask somebody who is all of 21 years or 22 years in those days. I believe the age is now a little elongated, to make a decision affecting his whole entire life. At 21, 22 is when you are asked to choose between the services. At 21, 22, you are asked to choose your cadre. So you end up making the mistake which I did. And I preferred the Bihar cadre to any other cadre. I would have got any other cadre if I wanted. So ultimately I went to the Bihar cadre. Be that as it may, as I said, it was more parental and peer group pressure which propelled me in that direction. I would have been happy continuing with teaching. I found that a very ennobling profession. I taught for about 2 years. And then accident took me to where I ended up being an IAS officer.
The most satisfying thing is...
I'll take just 1 minute. I told you about the various stages of what have I said in the book is disillusionment. So the first was when you qualified for the IAS, you became an instant celebrity in your surroundings, and you said, "Oh my God." Then you went to Mussoorie, to the academy, and there you found that there were so many blokes who were like you there. You are, after all, not such a distinguished person as you thought you were in your little surroundings. And so many of them were smarter than you, more brilliant than you. Somebody had topped the exam. So you came down a notch. Then you were taken for Bharat Darshan. In the Bharat Darshan, you met the Chief Minister of the state. You met other ministers. You had already met the President and the Prime Minister of India. Wherever you went, you were treated as VIPs. The district collector was a small flunky before you. Who bothers about the district collector? So this was the second, but it still kept your self-respect at elevated levels. Then you finally finished your training. Then you are attached to a district if you are an IAS officer or a police officer. And then after some time you get independent judge. That is when you feel the full blast. And you realize that after all, you are not the king. You are just the servant of the people. And those who think they are better servants of the people than you are will make your life difficult. And I am referring to politicians. So then that becomes that pulls and pressures and all kinds of things. And that is when an officer's mettle is really tested. So, after all, then you realize that you are just an ordinary human being pitchforked into a situation. You must try and manage it as best as you can, but just an ordinary folk. There is nothing extraordinary about you. So these are the various stages of disillusionment, as I have called them, and they bring you down to earth after your initial success when the results come out.
So finally, the most satisfying service is lecturer.
Most satisfying service. The maximum satisfaction that I had, I'll admit it without hesitation, has been doing the job of a minister of government. And I'm telling you why. Why am I saying this? Because there you are really formulating policy. As a civil servant, you are helping the politician, the minister, in formulating the policy. When I was working with Mr. Ambrose in the Ministry of Shipping and Transport, I remember one day there was an issue, and I went to my minister, who was a very senior party leader also, a former chief minister. And I told him, sir, this decision will not be right. We will not be able to convince Parliament about it. And he looked at me and he growled. He said, leave Parliament to me. You don't have to go there and answer questions. Well, I just gave him the advice I felt was right. He took the decision in his own light and then faced the music in Parliament. And he was right in the sense that that part was not my responsibility, that we'll face music in Parliament. I worked with the Chief Minister of Bihar, two of them, as Principal Secretary. And one of them, a very, very intelligent and distinguished political leader, he lost power and the post of Chief Minister because of internecine quarrels in his party, the Janata Party at that time. And what he had done was he went to seek a vote of confidence of the legislature party and lost. So when he came back to the secretariat crestfallen, I told him, sir, maybe you should have asked somebody to move a vote of no confidence against you instead of seeking a vote of confidence. So he looked at me and he said, but why didn't you tell me this before? And I told him it is none of my responsibility to give you political advice. That judgment you have to make. So you come very close to the political hemisphere in your career. And you have to be very strict and strong from within to make a distinction between what is your responsibility as a civil servant and what is not your responsibility. And political advice is not the responsibility of civil servants. That is something on which I am very firm.
One of your biggest mistake is quitting the civil services. Why it is so, sir? You have mentioned in the interviews.
No, it's very simple. It's very simple. Only a madman can do it. And there must be some degree of madness in me to have done it. But it was in the making. When I had that quarrel with the chief minister, I was greatly disillusioned. And I came in personal contact with Jayaprakash Narayan, whom the present generation will not know and appreciate. But he was a great freedom fighter. And I came in personal contact with him, and I was greatly influenced personally by him. And that's when I thought that I should not continue here. After all, in the civil service, you are very fragile. I was a district collector, right? I have a quarrel with the chief minister. Why? Because I stand up for my dignity. And I told them, one of the things I told them was, you can be unhappy with me, but don't publicly denigrate the post of a deputy commissioner. Don't denigrate. But they acted according to what they thought was their best way. But the point I'm making is that we have to follow the straight path in the civil service. There is no other way. Why did I say that I enjoyed my ministerial stint? Because there one could do things for the whole country. I'll just give you an example. Though paternity claims have been made by others, but if you go through my book, you will find that, for instance, the Pradhan Mantri Rural Roads project was entirely my concept. The National Highway Program, which we launched, was entirely my concept. I had an opportunity to spend 4 years in Germany, West Germany, and I saw the autobahns there, beautiful roads, and they were there all over Europe. So that was something which inspired me, and I always thought that if I had an opportunity, I'll create such national highways, even in India. And I got that opportunity. So from my 98 budget onwards, we started the National Highway Program. As far as Rural Roads Program is concerned, it came to me purely by accident. I mean, I knew that roads were in a very bad shape in the rural areas, especially in backward states. But the 99 elections were being held during the months of September, October. And in eastern part of India, that is still the monsoon season. So one day I went to a village and my car got stuck in the mud. And the villagers looked at me with a great deal of joy. They said, now you experience conditions in which we live. They, of course, pulled my car out of the mud, but I came back thinking that something has to be done. And therefore, when we got the mandate of the people again in 99, the 2002 budget had to be presented. I suggested to the Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, that we must start a very big program for rural roads. And it should be need-based. So we'll not go by the Gadgil-Mukherjee formula. We'll start a program which is need-based. We get the proposals from the state governments and give them money to construct rural roads. And then the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana was born. And it has done enormous good to our rural areas. Now, that is the kind of thing which one could do as a minister, among many other things.
Yes, sir. even the opposition party leaders, they used to appreciate about these three things, that is the golden quadrilateral and Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, and the very bold decision which you took on disinvestment. Even our state leader, Pa Chidambaram, he has appreciated many interview about all these three best things. Sir, one more thing just I want to ask, sir, that is, what are the major differences that you see between the bureaucracy of your time and the present time? How has the role of civil services evolved over the time?
To answer your question frankly, in fact, I see no difference. We were as bad then as we are today. I mean, you have black sheep everywhere. And unfortunately, what happens is that if you are in the civil service, your postings matter a great deal. You get married, you have raised a family, your children have to go to school. And suppose you are posted in a distant place where there are no schooling facilities. Then you have to make compromise. Either you keep your family at a place where they can go to school, or you, what do? You go to the politician and the minister and tell him to give you a better posting. So, my experience in the civil service has been that your postings are very important, which will determine the quality of life that you lead. Second, they will also determine the future course of your career. If somebody has held very important posts, then be considered for further important posts. And if somebody has been in less important positions, let's say, it will become very difficult for that person to rise to the top. So, you always had black sheep, as I said, even though in those days people were trying to please their masters. Some people are trying to do it even today. You may or may not agree with that course of action, but there are people who will take the easy route out and please the politician, the political masters, and try and get the best. Though my experience will also tell me that many of them have come to grief. And if you have followed the straight path, the chances that you will not come to grief are better.
Yes, sir.
So this question comes to you from another madman, because I also took a voluntary retirement from the civil service in 2007 and worked for 27 years. Now I have my own consulting firm and I'm in the business of skilling children. But this is more in terms of, so as a minister, you worked under two prime ministers and as a civil servant under three. Now, there is some influence that these working styles of these leaders has on when you work as a team. My question to you is this: how was their working style or their working patterns impacted you in your functioning as a career?
First, let me tell you that I have seen all the prime ministers of India. I may not have directly worked with them, but as IAS probationers, we were produced in our Bandgalas before Pandit Nehru, for instance. And I quoted this in my book, Relentless. Was what did Panditji tell us? To begin with, he said, you might be thinking you are the best because you are perhaps very good students in the university, that you have cracked the most difficult examination, and today you belong to the elite service. So you might be thinking that you are first raters, but I think you are second raters. So we were all very surprised. Why is he calling us second raters? He said, I call you second raters because you have settled for the warm blanket of security. You get into a structured civil service. You spend 35 years there, 35 years in that service. Your progression is predetermined. But where is adventure in this? it is only those who are adventurers whom I would consider to be first raters. This was his logic. So that was a bit of a come down for all of us. But Pandit Nehru, he passed away very soon. Then Lal Bahadur Shastri came. Then came Indira Gandhi. I was in Delhi when Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister. Especially when I was Joint Secretary, then you went to Parliament when ministers were answering questions, or you even attended cabinet committee meetings and all that. So I saw her functioning in her own way. Then Rajiv Gandhi, with whom I was face to face in Parliament, much to his discomfiture. Then came VP Singh, Chandrasekhar, VP Singh. We were together. He wanted me to become a Minister of State, which I did not. Then Chandrasekhar became Prime Minister. I was his Finance Minister. Then Narasimha Rao. And then Mr. Vajpayee. And now Mr. Modi. In the meanwhile, we had Dr. Manmohan Singh, whom I knew even as a civil servant. So I have seen all the Prime Ministers from close or from a distance. I have my own views about all of them. But as far as style of functioning is concerned, I'll tell you one thing about Mr. Vajpayee. He gave full freedom to his ministers. And he gave full freedom to his ministers to speak their mind even in cabinet meetings. And I remember, much to the annoyance of my other colleagues, I used to speak my mind in cabinet meetings. Once a senior cabinet colleague became very angry with me when I was putting across my point of view. And I told him in the cabinet meeting, I said, "Sir, as long as the Prime Minister entrusts the treasury of this country to me, I will try my best to safeguard its interests. I have a certain duty to perform as Finance Minister, and I'll continue to perform that duty. Once I am shifted from that ministry, then I don't care what happens. But as long as this is my responsibility, I'll continue to speak my mind." And Mr. Vajpayee approved that line of action. I mean, I can tell you that there were proposals which I knew the Prime Minister wanted passed, and I'll still oppose it in the cabinet from the point of view of the Ministry of Finance. And he didn't mind it. So working with him was a very different kind of experience. Chandrasekhar, of course, was briefly the Prime Minister, but he was my first leader, mentor in politics, because I joined politics under him. And one thing which I'd like to tell you about most of these leaders is that they came from the grassroots. They rose from the grassroots. So they had an understanding of this country and its issues like very few people would. Anyone who has just been put there by somebody else would not have that kind of grasp.
So your autobiography, Relentless, which gives an insight into our mind. We just give you a little inside story. We, of course, we were privileged that this was released by the former president, Shri Pranab. So, as per information, this building was also inaugurated by Shri Pranab. So we are sitting in a building. Would you like to share some moments that you have had with him, the former president?
Many moments. And let me begin by telling you that we have never been on the same side. We have always been on opposite sides. But we have been extremely extremely good friends. And that is why I invited him to launch my book when it happened. Pranab Mukherjee and I interacted when I was preparing the 91 budget. And without meaning any disrespect to anyone, one of the things which Pranab Mukherjee said in that launch function was that I was very unfair to Yeshwant Sinha because, we were a small group of people with only about 60 or 56 MPs, and we were supported by the Congress party. That's why that government was there and Chandrasekhar was the Prime Minister. So Chandrasekhar must have heard that Congress party had some reservations on the budget that I was preparing in 91. So he told me one day that you talk to Rajiv Gandhi and find out about what their reservations about the budget are. So I met Rajiv Gandhi in a common function, at the end of which I asked him, I said, I understand that your party has some reservations about the budget. Who should I speak to about the budget? So he promptly told me to speak to Pranab Mukherjee. So I called up Pranab Mukherjee, invited him for lunch at my place. He came. And unfortunately, I'm using the word deliberately, unfortunately, budget making in India still continues to be a very secret affair. There is no need for it anymore in our transparent democracy for the budget of government of India to be a secret. But it was secret, so I couldn't discuss the budget as such with him. But I discussed the overall economic situation, the balance of payments crisis that we were facing, and all that. And told him broadly what our approach was. He went back very pleased. I don't know what transpired between him and Rajiv Gandhi, but ultimately Congress party did not allow us to present a budget. I only presented an interim budget, and then the government collapsed, and then Manmohan Singh came, and he presented the full budget in July of 91, which became very famous. So what did Pranab Mukherjee say in that launch function? That I was very unfair to Yashwant Sinha. He told me about the steps that they were planning to take for economic reforms in the country, taking the country on a different path as far as the economy was concerned. But we prevented him from presenting that budget. So Pranab Mukherjee and I go back a long time. We have always been friends. He used to lose his temper in Lok Sabha at times. When the opposition, consisting of all of us, will make too much noise, he loses temper, say things which he should not have. So one day, he reacted angrily to some demand. And then the opposition protested, everybody protested. And the house had to be adjourned. So as members were walking out of the house, he rose from his seat, came to me, and he said, did I make a mistake? And I said, yes, you did. You did. You shouldn't have responded angrily in the house. So he said, what should I do? I said, when the house reassembles, you stand up and say sorry. This is exactly what he did, and the matter was settled. What I have noticed in Pranab Mukherjee is that he is, a great human being. Even when I was chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee in between 2009 and 2014, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance, and all important legislations used to come to the Standing Committee for examination and report. Any finance minister, including me, would want to be on the right side of the chairman of the Standing Committee, except one who is in jail today. But when Pranab Mukherjee became the finance minister, Minister again, he used to invite me for lunch once every month. He'll ascertain my convenience. We'll go over, have a lunch together, and over that we'll discuss some of the issues which were pending, let's say, in the standing committee. So, even as president, he was very nice. Whenever I asked for time, he'll immediately give me time. He'll occasionally invite me to Rajpati Bhavan for a meal with him. We'll discuss the issues of the day. So, I found in him a very good and great human being. And that is what has kept our relationship going.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, this one comes to you in your capacity as Minister of External Affairs. And you were also chair of the Indo-French Parliamentary Friendship Group. How strategic is France to India, sir, in the current scenario?
You are all aware that now France, for a long time, has been a member of the European Union. And European Union is very important to us, both politically and economically. And France is a very important player in that economic union. France is a very important player globally. And France has, despite the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, France has never surrendered its discretion to the US. They have taken an independent line. France is one of those rare countries which stood by us when we went for nuclear tests in 1998. France has been very friendly towards India right from the beginning, even from the days of our independence movement. So with France, we share a very close relationship. What was my challenge, both as Minister for Finance as well as External Affairs? My challenge was not only to keep that relationship going, but to strengthen it as much as I could, or we could, economically. In the economic arena, improve your trade relations with France, your technological relations with France, learn best practices from France, and strategically get their support for whatever you wanted to do at the global stage. For instance, France was one of the early supporters of India, in fact, an advocate of India for becoming a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So, France and India have always been very close. It's only that the relationship has to be maintained and further deepened and widened. And I try to make a contribution to that both as Finance Minister as well as the External Affairs Minister.
Sir, despite the support from US, UK, and France, India is still struggling to find its place as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. What strategies should we adopt to make UN in general and UNSC in particular more representative?
Instead of bothering about the UN, we should bother about ourselves. If India could become an economic superpower, then who can hold back India from taking whatever position we want to take globally? You go asking countries to support you, you will not get it. You're aware of the dynamics of the United Nations. In the United Nations, we have a group which wants to become a member of the Security Council, permanent members like Japan, like India, like Brazil, like South Africa, Germany. And you have a group of spoilers. They're called the Coffee Club, which consists of those who want to pull your leg. So Pakistan, Italy, Chile, and other countries have got together and said, prevent these fellows from getting in. And therefore, when the UPA government was there and they formed this G4 group of India, Japan, South Africa, and Brazil, I did not approve of this decision because I said, and Japan, I said, far from acquiring their strengths, you are actually trying to share their weaknesses. So Japan is being opposed by China. China will oppose you also. If Italy is opposing Germany, then Italy will oppose you also. If Chile is opposing Brazil, or Argentina is opposing Brazil, they'll start opposing you also. So there is no merit in joining a group and pushing your case. India must stand alone and demand that we be members, permanent members of the Security Council on our own strength. We are the second most populous country in the world. We command a great respect because of our history, because of our culture. What we need to add even more is, as I said, economic strength, which is what the world appreciates. And then, nothing is going to stop you. I'll give you a small example. I was Consul General of India in Frankfurt. Okay, there used to be, there still is, a very important industrial fair which is held in Hanover in Germany. India used to participate in the Hanover Fair every year. We'll take our wares, exhibit them. These are the industrial goods that we are making. No impact. China, which was a closed country then, just set up a representative office. There was no display. And I remember, as person in charge of commercial relations with Germany, I used to be present every year in Hanover Fair. So I was there and I could see, large number of people going to the Chinese representative office to make inquiries. And nobody was coming to us. Why? Because China was the new person on the block. I'm not saying that we should become closed like China was or is, but it is economic strength of the country which will be appreciated more than any other kind of strength. And that is something which we must build. We must make our country economically strong. India is destined to be a superpower. Like China is today a superpower. India is destined to be a superpower today or tomorrow. 5 trillion economy or 10 trillion economy. You become a 10 trillion economy, you become a 15 trillion economy. And the world will come to invite you to become member of the Security Council.
Sir, on this road to the 5 trillion economy, or let's say getting this to this level of huge economic strength, there is a feeling that there's been a neglect of the manufacturing sector. And coupled with the report on employment and the joblessness that we are talking about, and considering that manufacturing does provide a huge amount of opportunities on jobs to be created, especially not only in just urban places, but in certain non-urban places too. Where do you see the connection between manufacturing, joblessness, and economic strength, sir?
Well, manufacturing has to be the fulcrum on which your economic strength will rest. I have no doubt in my mind about it. Historical evidence, country after country, will show that the country has become economically strong on the strength of manufacturing. Somehow, despite all our efforts, manufacturing has not progressed as well as it should have. But after 91, somehow the services sector took off. And a lot of employment opportunities were created in the services sector. It started contributing almost over 50% of our GDP. On the other hand, the Chinese laid emphasis on manufacturing, invited the world to help them with manufacturing, and became the manufacturing hub of the world. From manufacturing, they are going to services. We are trying to go from services to manufacturing, but it is not taking off as well as it should have, despite this National Manufacturing Commission, which was set up by the UPA, or the Make in India movement that the present government started in its first stint. Somehow, it has not taken off. And I once wrote a piece which was published by the Economic Times when Make in India slogan was given. And my thesis was, you make in India and Make in India will follow. Make India. And why did I say Make India? I quoted example of the National Highway Program. And I said, when we started the National Highway Program, people came to me and they said, you have started the program, but where is the equipment in this country to make world-class roads? You remember those old road rollers? You remember the sight of, everything, charcoal, everything, aggregate being mixed, stone chips being mixed manually by laborers. That's not the way you will build world-class highways. You need equipment. So they came to me. They said, we are in a very poor state as far as equipment is concerned. So if you really you are serious about this, you must allow us to import equipment duty-free. I said, okay. I consulted my officers and we decided that we'll allow the import of road building equipment duty-free for some time. Encourage Indian manufacturers to enter into technological arrangements and start manufacturing those equipments here. So for a period of time, those equipments have been now being made in India. So what is it? You are trying to make India and Make in India follow. This is what we have to do everywhere. This fighter Rafale aircraft, for instance, is another big example of this. With every foreigner, you tell them we'll buy some of your equipment to begin with, but you must transfer technology. And ultimately, we will start manufacturing those equipments here. MiGs, for instance, India has emerged as the MiG repair center, MiG aircraft repair center for the entire Southeast. So that is how manufacturing will progress, not only through slogans, but by actual work on the ground.
Sir, we have Make in India, Digital India, Startup India. In spite of that, we are not able to revive our economy. Could you please suggest a few measures so that we can see some better India?
We have ABCD India, we have DEF India, we have XYZ India. I mean, there is hardly any letter of the English language which has not been used for a slogan in recent years. Forget about that. What is the basic problem? I'm glad you brought it to my pet theme. I'll put it very simply because I'm not an economist. I understand economics in very simple terms and try and explain economics in very simple terms. What is the problem in India today? The problem is of demand. No, even more than unemployment. What is the genesis of the present crisis? The collapse of demand. We don't have today's newspapers, but one of the newspapers said today that 75% of the rural demand has vanished in last 2 years. There is no demand. So if there is no demand, then there will be no production. If there is no production, then there will be no investment. So you might be sitting on tons of currency, but investment will not take place. So the starting point has to be demand. And common sense tells me that there are three kinds of demands in the economy. One is demand for investment goods like cement, steel, other things. Then you have consumption demand or demand for goods and services as consumers, which also is of two types. One is essential demand like food, etc., clothing, etc., which we have to fulfill in any case. And there is a discretionary demand. That if we have money saved after spending on essential demands, then we'll go and buy a refrigerator, we'll go and buy a motorcycle, we'll go and buy a car, or acquire a house, or whatever. These are all discretionary demands. And then you have export demand. Now we are doing poorly with respect to all kinds of demands in the economy. There is no investment goods demand because no fresh investment. In fact, our industrial capacity is operating at 75% of its capacity as per Reserve Bank of India study. Where did the collapse of demand start? It started in the rural areas. It started in the rural areas because the farmers were not getting a good deal. So over a period of time, their purchasing power was affected. When their purchasing power was affected, then the landless worker who works in agricultural sector, his purchasing power was affected. Everything which is connected with agriculture, there the purchasing power was affected. And the crisis of demand started from the rural sector, agriculture and rural sector. Then it went to small towns and villages because unemployment increased. Unemployment is at 45-year high. And now it has impacted on the organized sector, the corporate demand, corporate houses and all that. So what you're seeing, for instance, in the automobile sector is a reflection of that. So this is the one virtuous circle or one sequence of events. Then you have the other thing. And what is that other thing? That is, investment will depend on money which becomes available. And where is money going to come from? From your and my savings. So domestic savings, which includes household savings, private sector savings, public sector savings, which includes public sector, includes the entire governmental setup. So these three constitute domestic savings. And on this is based investment. Now, investment at one point of time in our country reached 40% of GDP, which was equivalent to the kind of investment which was taking place in the East Asian economies, which made them little tigers until they collapsed because of the financial crisis in 2008-9. Now we have come down to 28%, 12% decline. 12% decline in today's GDP terms would be 24 lakh crore rupees. 24 lakh crore rupees. So suddenly 24 lakh crore rupees of investment is not taking place in our country. So how will economic growth take place? And this has been happening over a period of time. It is nothing in the economy happens suddenly, except nuclear tests and economic sanctions that happen suddenly one day. Otherwise, they build up slowly, and it is neglect of the telltale signs of the economic downturn, neglect of those signs, and the readiness of policymakers to tackle them that has resulted in the present slowdown. And let me also tell you from personal experience, because I noticed it in 91, I have noticed it in 1998, I have noticed it in 2008-9. Once you're down there, then it takes time. It's not an issue of 1 quarter or 2 quarters. It's a question of 3 to 4 years minimum of sustained effort on the part of policymakers to take the economy out of that trough in which it has fallen.
There were few students also who I was coming up. They mentioned they'd like to ask questions.
Our parliament is facing two crises. At one side, in the recent time, it is becoming a rubber stamp kind of an institution with no real function. Another side, this decorum is another issue. So how can we bring in this code of conduct to the parliamentarians to make it a functioning institution and bring it out of that rubber stamp nature? It's because the bills are being passed without any procedure being followed. So this is next. Thanks.
Very good question. Thank you. Parliament is a creature of the Constitution of India. But over a period of time, laws have been framed for the functioning of Parliament. The rules of procedure have been framed for the functioning of Parliament. And again, over a period of time, many conventions have developed which should have the same force as law. And you are aware of the fact that the entire British Constitution, Great Britain, functions on the basis of an unwritten constitution. It's all on the basis of conventions. Now, therefore, conventions play a very important role in the functioning of Parliament, apart from the written rules, laws and the Constitution. Why isn't Parliament functioning as Parliament should of a big democracy like India? It did in the initial years. Now it does not, one way or the other. It's very clear that members are not observing the rules. I'll tell you a simple rule. Simple rule is, if I'm standing up in my seat and speaking, I have to look at the speaker. I have to look at the speaker all the time because she is the presiding officer. And I'm addressing her. I'm not addressing a public meeting. So I don't turn around like this, and look at the house once or twice. You might do it. Just watch the highest in the land when Parliament assembles on the 18th of November. Just see how many of them are really addressing the chair and how many of them are addressing the whole house looking at it, and how many of them are addressing the whole nation looking even beyond. Parliament is not a place for public speeches that you do in your public meetings. Then there is a rule that nobody will cross when somebody is speaking between him and the speaker. Nobody will cross. And if you have to indeed cross, you must crouch and cross. How many people are observing that? I'm just mentioning two simple examples to tell you how parliamentary conventions have been given a go by. So it results in disruption, though I am a great believer of the fact that Parliament of India or state assemblies are not King's Academy or a school or a college where the students will sit down and listen with rapt attention to what is being said. No. Parliament consists of representatives of the people. Representatives of the people cannot divorce themselves from the tumult outside. We can sit here in peace and quiet and talk while a demonstration is going out in the streets. But a parliamentarian will not. A parliamentarian will reflect that noise inside the house. So some noise is justified in a democracy. Disruption of the house is not really justified, not really necessary. You have to come down hard if that happens. But then again, we are lenient, so that never happens. You don't expel a member. Do you know the this reservation bill for women, 33% reservation bill for women in state assemblies and parliament was passed in Lok Sabha, in Rajya Sabha, by expelling some members and bodily lifting the protesters, taking them outside the house. The marshals did that. But it couldn't be done in Lok Sabha, because Lok Sabha is a bigger house. And how many people will you throw out the house? So it became so difficult that the bill has not been passed even today in the Lok Sabha. It was passed many years ago in the Rajya Sabha. So apply the principle of consensus. The important thing in parliamentary democracy is consensus. If the rulers of the day want to act on the basis of consensus, they will carry parliament. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Chandrasekhar, they were great parliamentarians. Great parliamentarians. And therefore the parliament, the houses listened to them in rapt attention whenever they got up to speak, even in chaos. But you can't do it by the use of a danda, by the use of a stick. The last session of parliament was a great disappointment, as much for you as for me, because it did behave like a rubber stamp. The parliamentary committees had not yet been organized, and many important legislations were passed without reference to the standing committees. The standing committees do make a great contribution to the legislative process of this country. And I would consider it a sin in our parliamentary democracy to ignore the standing committees.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Shivangi Mandal, and it's my pleasure to ask you a question. Having read your book, Confessions of a Swadeshi Reformer, which I found really good, and I would like to appreciate your writing style. So it was very good, and I like the diction as well. So the question would be, there's chapter 8, I guess, in which you mentioned that your biggest achievement would be Kisan Credit Card Scheme. While you were giving an interview to the reporter, you've mentioned it in a paragraph. So about that, as well as the B3 model, which you talk about in the next after the Pokhran issue, you talk about this B3 model which you wanted to take up in the parliament. And yes, B3. I think it was good budget, Bihar and bomb. B3. And the last one, morality. You talked about morality, that you have not found it in the political sphere, because when you stood for the trust vote and the Orissa backing out of the trust vote. So how did you get over that depression? Because that phase would have been tumultuous for you.
So that's like 3 questions in one.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quickly forgotten all the 3. So you
B3. So Kisan Credit Card Scheme.
Kisan Credit Cards.
Yes.
Okay, that was my first budget. And how did it come about? Because I went, when the budget is made, very briefly, then you have your first meeting with the Prime Minister. And you discuss the overall approach to the budget. So I went to Mr. Vajpayee, and my officers were also there, a limited team which is involved in budget making. And we were discussing the approach to the budget. And Mr. Vajpayee told me that I don't care what you do elsewhere, but you must take care of the farmers of India in your budget. So how do I take care of the farmers of India? There were a lot of issues on which, a lot of steps we took. But one of them was to ease credit for them. And the easiest way was to have a special credit card for the farmers of this country. Like everybody in these days is carrying a credit card, and you go to a shop, you go to an airline, and you don't have to deal in cash, and you get whatever you want, and the bill will come to you later from your bank. So I thought of devising a card, call it Kisan Credit Card, which will give the farmer the same services that townspeople have or others have in their shopping. And that's how the idea of Kisan Credit Card was born. I discussed it with the bankers after I made the announcement, and they were all, some of them had something like that from before. So everybody fell in line, and the farmers of this country, despite all the failings of our systems, were able to benefit from it. So that's how Kisan Credit Card came. The three Bs were what Mr. Advani had said before we went into the 1999 elections, that what is the strength on the base of which we are doing it. It was the three Bs. Because we had gone for nuclear tests, we had imposed President's rule in Bihar, and the 99 budget was a good budget. So he said, he didn't say Kargil. We had won Kargil, but we did not use national security as an election plan.
So the last one, so morality, the trust vote part of it. How it would have been like a saddening phase, right, when you lost it just because of one. And which you've mentioned in the book also, that it was really nice because, it was something which was out of respect it happened. So.
No, it showed the strength, the majesty of our democracy. Here was a trust vote. I also felt it was entirely unnecessary because we were in the budget session. And you are aware of the convention which prevails in our country, that if you lose vote in Lok Sabha on a money bill, that's like losing a trust vote and you will have to quit. The government will have to quit. So the whole budget was being discussed in Parliament day after day, day after day. Then the whole budget will have to be passed by Parliament. And that is something which will enable the opponents, which would have enabled them to defeat the government. This was my logic. But the President of India thought it fit to order a Prime Minister to take a vote of confidence. That vote of confidence was moved, and the House was packed. Everyone was there, from a serving Chief Minister who had not yet resigned his Lok Sabha seat to people who were very ill. They had to be carried, and both the opposition and the ruling alliance, we mustered our strength to win the vote of confidence. We were let down by one single politician. I will not name her, but she deserted at the last moment, and therefore it became touch and go. And ultimately it was go because of just one vote. And Mr. Vajpayee put in his, went to Rashtrapati Bhavan to give his resignation. Why? Because there was a sanctity to just one vote. Just one vote. And that I would regard as one of the most glorious chapters in our parliamentary democracy, that a government loses a vote of confidence by one vote and goes out of office.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. My question is, you have touched on Rafael and also UN Security Council, our self-reliance on economic and growth itself. Because we are begging to international for arms because we are importing. And is that we have to demonstrate by spending 57,000 crores for importing Rafale? Why not imported a few Rafales and then started making India program itself parallelly? Because this is their long program, 2 years program, still to arrive, already spending that much money.
Yeah. And you are aware of the fact that that was the earlier proposal, that we'll buy 18 in flyover condition, and the rest, I don't know, 108 would be built by HAL here on the basis of transfer of technology. That proposal was given up and we decided to buy 36 separately. That's become controversial, so we'll not go into that controversy. The issue is still pending for orders in the Supreme Court, and I'm one of the petitioners. So let it rest there. But as a matter of general principle, I am all for buy few, get technology transfer, and then start manufacturing the rest. Bofors gun, for instance, is a famous example. Um, South Africa started making Bofors guns and the ordnance for Bofors guns. And during Kargil, we went to South Africa to buy the ordnance for Bofors guns. So, and Bofors guns played a very important role during that conflict. Israelis' missiles, for instance, play a very important role in our Air Force today. So, buy some, make the rest according to your requirement in the country. That should be the general policy, not only in defense procurement, but generally.
Why is India more concerned about its international standing and international reputation and framing the schemes accordingly? Whereas we also have the fundamental areas like scientific agriculture, we need to have quality education in the villages, we need to have ecosystem conservation. But India is more focused on its international standing. So why is it so? Thank you.
No, it has to be equal emphasis on both. Your international standing is also very important for a country like India. We don't want to be any Tom, Dick and Harry in international meetings. We started off very well in 1947 when India became independent. And ever since then, in all international deliberations, India has played a very important role. So that we should continue. And I like to tell you that our foreign service, for instance, is extremely well regarded everywhere in all other countries. And Indian drafting is considered to be superior to many other countries' drafting skills. So drafting is something which helps you dominate the scene wherever you are. In any international meet, they'll ultimately turn to you that Indians should do the drafting because we are good at it. So that is something which we must preserve. Our diplomats have played very important roles in international organizations and nationally for the country. The other is the emphasis on all the things that you have mentioned, because without those improvements and now in this day and age, the help of technology and artificial intelligence will not be at the same level as the other countries. And therefore, a person like me will emphasize repeatedly that in every area, whether it's education, it's agriculture, it's industry, even in services sector, everywhere we should use the latest technology in order to be the best in the world. At the same time, maintain your presence at the international level. In fact, increase your presence at the international level. There was a time in the early years after independence where India was the dispute settler of the world. Wherever there was a dispute, the services of the government of India would be taken, and we will then settle the dispute. That part has been neglected over a period of time now. So if you have a crisis in Syria, we are not doing anything about it. If there is a crisis in Latin America, we are not doing anything about it. If there is a crisis in Africa, we are not doing anything about it. We are not doing anything about it even in places near our home. But that was the kind of role which India had played earlier. And I look forward to a day when India will have a voice and it will be heard with respect. and it will be used for dispute resolution internationally.
We have heard a term in the civil services mains exam this year that bona fide crimes that makes the civil servants prone to prosecutions, and many civil servants have been even imprisoned for that. Could you explain how, as a civil servant with accountability, can avoid from committing such so-called bona fide crimes? Or is there anything really called bona fide crimes? Thank you.
There are no bona fide crimes. There are bona fide mistakes. And I don't think anyone should be punished for bona fide mistakes. That's a distinction which the Central Vigilance Commission, which will perhaps deal with the case, should make. The political masters should remember that distinction, keep that in mind. A civil servant cannot really function properly if bona fide mistakes are not allowed. But criminality is a no-go area. Certainly not criminality. Somebody is doing it for ulterior with something through ulterior motives, then it's inexcusable and should not be allowed, and that person should be proceeded against him. I am aware of the recent cases where civil servants who have put in 35 years of service, honest service, they have built a very good reputation for themselves, have been hauled up for crimes which they have not committed. That demoralizes the civil service. I am personally aware of one very honest, upright civil servant who was secretary in the Ministry of Telecom. And he was prosecuted by the CBI entirely because of political reasons. And when the court, he was charge sheeted, the matter came to court, he faced trial there, and ultimately the judge not only acquitted him with due honor, but also passed a stricture on the CBI and said that the officer who filed the charge sheet should be proceeded against for involving a honest, upright officer in a crime which he did not commit. So, but we are living in very difficult times these days, and it's politics which is dictating who will be prosecuted, who will not be prosecuted, and that is very unfortunate. That will militate against the civil service functioning independently and properly.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. My name is Yeshwant, and my question is related to nuclear test. Sir, since you were a part of Union Cabinet during the time of Pokhran 2 nuclear test, what were the challenges faced by you due to that nuclear test, both inside and outside India? And in this current situation, is there a need to change in no first use policy? That is nuclear doctrine of India. Thank you.
First, when the nuclear tests were announced by the Prime Minister, and the world got to know about it, then immediately economic sanctions were imposed on India by the most powerful countries of the world. In fact, one of the joint secretaries of the Ministry of Finance was in Germany for bilateral aid talks, and he went to wherever the meeting was supposed to take place. When he arrived there, then he was told by the Germans, "You go back, we are not talking to you." I myself went to Canada, for instance, Ottawa, the capital, for a meeting of the Commonwealth Finance Ministers in October of that year, 1998. And the Canadians, it was a multilateral meeting that I was attending, but the Canadians will not deal with me bilaterally. In fact, there was a Sikh gentleman who was a minister in the Canadian government then, and he told me that he was very ashamed that the Canadians will not allow him to have a bilateral discussion with him, but could he invite me home so that his old father, who was visiting him from India, could talk to me and feel happy about it. And I consulted our High Commissioner in Ottawa, and he said there was no harm. So I went to his place where we had samosa and tea, and I talked to his old father. That was the kind of situation. I mean, Mr. Yeshwant Sinha, who was the foreign minister, he experienced many more such things. So it was a challenge. It was a huge challenge, and we are happy that we were able to pull the country out of that challenge, meet the challenge frontally. And Prime Minister Vajpayee did not make a bilateral visit to the US until President Clinton came first to India. And then, the thaw took place. No first. I think it's a very healthy policy that we have, which was adopted after a great deal of deliberation with all the experts, that while we have the nuclear weapons, India will not be first to use them. And I think if every country in the world followed India and said no first use, then we would have achieved the nuclear disarmament. This weapon is of no use to us. But other countries not following us, but I don't think that should force us to revise our policy on no first use. I'm a little dismayed currently, because I'd like to remind you that when the nuclear tests were actually happened, and the Cabinet Committee on Security, which consisted of only 4 or 5 people, ministers, we met in Prime Minister's house. It was decided that he will write a letter to President Clinton explaining why India went for nuclear tests. And we said we went for nuclear tests because China in our neighborhood has nuclear weapons, and many of them. And therefore, for our security and safety, we must have nuclear weapons. That was the logic that Prime Minister Vajpayee offered to Clinton. We did not refer to Pakistan. In any case, Pakistan is such a small little worm. Why bother so much about Pakistan? Why? I mean, I don't approve of this chest thumping that we are doing day in and day out about Pakistan. The effort of all governments has been to de-hyphenate India and Pakistan. De-hyphenate. And we have made it clear to our foreign interlocutors that we do not appreciate your joining India and Pakistan. Talking about India and Pakistan. Or you visit India and also, or you visit Pakistan and also come to India. No. And I had said publicly one day that if you compare India and Pakistan, I will feel diminished as an Indian. Where is India and where is Pakistan? So, that is my view. It doesn't match with the views of the rulers of today.
When can we absolve our 3 pillars of the democracy with the obsession with paper? We run everything on paper. Judiciary carries boxes of papers. Can that ever go?
I'll tell you a personal experience. I went for the first time to the Supreme Court of India because I was one of the petitioners in this Rafale case. So one day I decided to go and watch the fun. So I went to court number 1, which is the Chief Justice's court. And what did I say? See, there was a huge bunch of fat files which were kept somewhere, and it was given to the chief as the case came up. So, all the 3 judges who constituted the bench. So one file like this. And they'll have it in front of them as the lawyers argued. Then after the arguments were over, in whatever time, you know what happened? There was a kind of a well in front of them. They'll pick up the file and throw that. Each one of them will pick up their files and throw it there. And then somebody will come at the end of the court hours and probably take it. So I entirely agree with you. When I was preparing for the IAS, I read somewhere that you will move from second-hand books to second-hand files. If you succeeded, then you will move from reading second-hand books to second-hand files. And that's how government files are. Absolutely second-hand. Torn, the edges are frayed, all that kind of thing. And there are some strict instructions about how to maintain files and deal with a file. Many of our civil servants have forgotten that, but I did not. And even as a minister, I used to repair the file and send it back. And I'll make a note in the margin saying, I have repaired this file. There is a small little courtesy, for instance. Suppose I am the last officer dealing with a file and I have to put it to the minister. I will not be signing. If I am required to sign on the last page here, then courtesy demanded that I attach a fresh note sheet, a blank note sheet. So I used to do that as a minister, as a courtesy to whoever will see the file after me. So files have to be replaced now in this day and age with something better. And we have all the technology. You know, this little thing called a mobile phone. How engrossed are all of us in this? Day in and day out. Because this contains all the information you want. So, when I joined civil service, and I had my first charge as a sub-divisional magistrate, what were the three equipments in my office? One was a telephone, the old style telephone. No, apart from that, you had to pick it up and tell the operator at the exchange what number you wanted. Then that number will be connected. That was the kind of telephone that we had. The second was a typewriter. And third was a teleprinter machine, which was rarely used but for urgent messaging. That was all. Look at the life of a person today, including an officer or a minister, with so much technology at our command. So do away with paperwork and let's move to technology.
Final message, final advice to our aspirants, those who are going to be the future bureaucrats. Final message.
Well, we have had a long discussion and I'm very happy. In all my interactions, I always enjoy the Q&A the most because then you are responding to the point which a person has in mind. It is not a one-way traffic. So I'm very glad that we've had a two-way traffic here. I have told you what I wanted to tell you, and you have responded by asking me questions. So it has been very useful. And I hope all of you do well in the exam that you will take for the civil services. If you succeed and become a civil servant, don't forget to continue learning. You must continuously improve. And every day and from everyone, you can learn something. From the lowest visitor who will come to you to the highest in the land, there will be something to learn. All that you need to do is to keep your eyes and ears open and be ready to receive. The other day, somebody asked me a question about the economy. So I said neither Mr. Vajpayee nor I was an economist, but we listened to expert advice from economists and civil servants. And what is the duty At that level, the duty is to listen to the advice. The duty is to imbibe as much of that as you can or should. And then the duty is to formulate your policy accordingly. If you do that, then advice is useful. Otherwise, it falls on deaf ears. So please be open. In your civil service career, please be open. Interact with people. Listen to the advice apart from their grievances. And try and act upon the advice, redress their grievances, and you will be doing a great job. One thing which I have told younger generations everywhere is excellence. You must excel in whatever responsibility is given to you. Routine disposal will not do. So pursue excellence as a virtue, and you will have great deal of mental satisfaction and also progression in your career.